To see examples of what we talked about on this episode, along with further information, go to bunchofdorks.com.
Welcome everyone to
Two Dimension Podcast,
the comic book podcast
with no direction. Two Dimension. Two Dimension.
Okay, hello everybody, this is Don. I'm Rook free today, but that's alright because I'm here with our friend Peter Taylor. Hello Peter.
Hey Don, how you doing?
I'm good. Peter's been on the show before. He works on the fantastic series Pioneers, Blood and Stars, and you're working on the third part.
Fourth? It's
Fourth?
Fourth part.
Okay, I was aware of two. So, let's just get started on... Actually, if we can talk about the third part a little bit, because I don't remember this one.
The third part, I think, Don, was the one you were in. That was part 3. You remember you got that? We did that little cameo of you and Rook.
Well, I saw the panels, and I'll be honest with you, I posted the panel on Facebook and everywhere else that I'm on social media because I was really happy. Yeah, Rook and myself were drawn on the panel, and one, I was really happy. You made me a lot tougher looking than I am in real life, and you made me feel like I was part of the United Kingdom in it. When I read it, I seemed like it had an accent, so I thought, well, that's really neat, you know, but I was born on the wrong side of the pond. But I didn't get an opportunity to read that part. And,
I'll make sure you get a copy.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought I'd sent you one, but I'll make sure you get a copy when I start the mail-in for episode 4. So yeah, you and Rook were put in as a pair of cops who were deceived into looking the other way by free coffee.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure if that resonates with what you guys actually would be led astray by, but yeah, I had. There's a little sort of subplot or subtext of the robots in the story, kind of having a community of their own. Yeah. So you've kind of got robots on the side of the bad guys, and you've got robots that are used in everyday life. And as I say, I like to put in this thing, there's some sort of understanding going on between them that is outside of the knowledge of the human characters. So there's a little community thing going on there. So I love those little... I was trying to write a little article about it over the last couple of days, which is the thing I find most fun to write about is actually just ideas.
Right.
You know, and I'm not saying I'm Douglas Adams because I'm far from it, but I enjoy the work of Douglas Adams. And I was reading something where someone had said, no one really buys Douglas Adams' books, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books, for the plot, or really the characters, because they're a little sort of one-dimensional. But what you buy it for is this explosion of ideas that just comes out. And I think that's the bit I enjoy writing about and drawing most. Just crazy ideas, you know. I started this book thinking about, well, okay, what if we put a vampire in space? What if we put a vampire on Enceladus? And then thinking, but why now? Why not before? We'd obviously built a colony there. Why were they not on the first colony ship? Why are they there 100 years later, or when it's established, or what have you? And just all these ideas I just love playing with and seeing where they go. So that's the kind of thing I really enjoy writing about, Tom.
Okay, that's fantastic, and it gives me a whole bunch of other questions. Let's tell the listeners, though, even I said Pioneers, Blood and Stars, just tell me, give them more of an elevator pitch of what the series is.
I'm terrible at this, by the way. But the core of the series is there is a vampire, an attractive female vampire called Lilu, and she has arrived on a mining colony on Enceladus. It's as if you know it, it's one of the moons of Saturn, so it's in our solar system, and it's an ice world. It's the world they recently have discovered geysers spurting out of Enceladus. So I've kind of worked it into the storyline where we're obviously with things warming up on our home planet. We've lost the ice. We've lost a lot of water, so we're now importing it. So we run ice mines on places like Enceladus to ship it back to Earth and into this colony. And it's a tough working man's colony, working person's colony. Life is hard there. Things go wrong there. There's accidents, all sorts. This vampire arrives, and she's essentially looking for a quiet life. Yeah, she doesn't want to make too much noise. We don't know in the early days exactly why she's there, but she's turned up at this point and she's thinking, well, there's industrial accidents. If the occasional person goes missing, maybe I won't be noticed. I can just do what I got to do, and I've got to, and I'll live here and I'll make a life here and see what happens. She's immediately befriended by a character called Began, who we were talking just off camera about accents, Dom.
Yeah.
And I originally wrote her in the first issue with an Irish accent.
Yeah.
I was just thinking Irish accent as I wrote her, because I think Began sounds like an Irish name. It's not. It's a made-up name. And she kind of befriends Lilu against any programming that Lilu has ever had before. She says, why is this human interested in me? I'm a vampire. I'm as likely to bite her neck as anything else that may happen. But she's so infectious in her, I won't say childlike, but her as a kind of innocent. Lilu finds herself starting to care for her and wanting to look after her. So a few things happen in the early episodes. And then at the end of episode 3, I think, we actually find out that Began is Fae, a Fae creature, a fairy creature. So she's actually not human herself. And that has absolutely turned Lilu's world upside down for the reasons of, how did she not recognize her? Because vampires and fae would be, in my universe, mortal enemies or immortal enemies, if you like. Mm-hmm. And they have been around for thousands of years, and one of the things they can do that humans can't is know what they're dealing with. And she didn't recognize us, so we get to explore the reasons why that. And worse than not recognizing her, she's actually been trying to protect her. So again, from that incredible shock that she's just had, she runs away from the scene entirely, and now needs to find out what this girl actually knows about her. Was this an intentional act? And that's all played out on a backdrop of a new mayor coming into into Enceladus, and locking the place down in martial law. And we don't know why as yet, and the reason why is going to be revealed in episode 4. So all these things that have been going on together, sort of side by side, these little plot lines, start to come together in episode 4, which is where we are, which is the penultimate episode, with a finale set for episode 5, hopefully by the end of the year.
That was beautiful.
Does that in any way do it justice?
Yes. I was impressed because you said you weren't good at it, but I enjoyed everything you said. You said it. I can't stress, when he's talking with the main character, she's beautiful, but she's a character, she's really cool and very sure of herself and heroic, even though you kind of give this underpinning that maybe there's some badness, maybe a little.
I mean, at the end of the day, she's a vampire and she has to feed. And when she arrives, right, she's thinking, I'll just eat whoever or I'll just feed off whoever I fancy. But she started to make these connections with vegan. There's a guy in there called Angelo. There's also a robot, a barista, coffee maker, a robot called Costa, which is kind of a pun because there's a coffee chain called Costa in the UK, spelt differently, so I don't get sued. But it's a little pun on the name. And she's got all these relationships, and I think in episode 2, she gets really cross with herself, saying, because of these connections I'm making that I don't really understand, I've now got to choose to feed off either good people or bad people, and I can only eat the bad people now. Where has this all come from? So she's quite confused by the situation that she's in, which I think allows us to experiment a little bit more with her character rather than just being a vampire night crawler that's creeping around this base biting people when she feels like it. There's stuff that's going on that she doesn't quite understand, and we'll find out a fair bit about why that is in episode 4 as well. And it's just another one of those crazy what if ideas that I had. What if I put different immortal creatures into an enclosed space together? What would happen? And as I played that out, I found that there was some fun ways that I could experiment with, of saying, okay, but what if they didn't recognize each other for what they are, and why would that be? We reveal a lot of that in episode 4 as well, and it's kind of fun. It's one of my favorite little twists that I've got. I don't know whether it's going to mean anything to anybody, but it's a little twist that has some kind of very, very lengthy basis in fact. But I'll let the story tell itself. I won't give that bit away because it's one of my favorite little twists.
All right. Now, I've only read the first 2, as we talked about. This is all new to me. But I will say, a lot of the stuff you talked about, I have read in the comic. And I said this the last time we met. When she comes on that shuttle to go to the destination, I felt like I was doing it too. It's a really wide craft. It reminds me of a modern airplane that people fly, but it was more than that. And while the people are coming on, like we always do, he had small, like a juice box floating in the atmosphere. He had a couple of little things that, when I first read it, it was kind of there, but I didn't pay attention. Later, when I came back, I said, well, this guy's really clever. It's like things that's real. Like, you don't notice everything right away, but it's there, it's subtle. And it shows her trying to be indifferent when she's going, but she does start making connections when I read it. And that's hard to do because, you're an artist, and I will say quite well. But you also have the poetry and the subtlety when you write the story. It's not black and white. There's a lot of shades of gray in it. There's a lot of thought, a lot of things that it's what makes life worth living. You have in your stories, which, and even when you talk about it, you're sitting there saying you hope people notice it, but you're not sure. I think it's kind of hard not to when I read your stories. I'm looking forward to reading this next part. She is an extremely strong character, and I'm sorry that she might eat me someday. So
I think there's probably worse ways to go, to be fair. I've really fallen in love with the characters. I do have some ideas for a second volume. I don't know if I would ever actually do it. I might move on to something else. There's another little idea that's burrowing away at the back of my brain, very, very unformed at the moment, which I can talk about if you want to see what goes on at the back of my head. But this is very much a self-contained five-part story, which I think is going to end really well. I think it's a really solid ending. But there's just a little sort of almost a post-credit scene that I've got written into the last episode that could set up a whole nother element of this stuff. But I'll tell you one thing it won't do. I get very frustrated with big story, and I'm really interested in your opinion on this, Dom. I call them big stories, where you start off with sort of an everyday character, and they end up being the queen of the universe or king of the, of the whatever. I like my stories small. I like my stories. And I know I'm talking about vampires and fairies here, but I like my stories human. I like them in things that I can relate to and at the level that I can relate to. So, we can get caught up in big stories as these characters do, but, at no point is Leeloo going to turn out to be the head vampire of all the vampires or anything like that, because that's just not the story I want to write. I like things human and tangible, even though it's high concept fantasy stuff. But that's just the story. I like people,
Right.
so I like turning my characters into what I can identify with as real people.
That's interesting because if you read comic books, you have a massive epic in your head. It doesn't matter if you've ever executed it. We all have one, and they're all awesome, by the way, even if they're not published. But
Right.
when I was a kid, whenever I drew, like, say, a fantasy story, the main character and all their friends were princes. They were all royalty, they were all kings, they were all somebody of importance. And I noticed that a lot of us, when you're younger, that's what you do. It's exactly what you said. You become the king of the universe. And or the most powerful creature ever lived. But if you read old stories, the old stuff, it's basically somebody that's plowing their field of their own place, and then something comes up and they have to step up to it. And then, when the story's finished, they go back to plowing the fields. And a lot of those are that way. And that's the ones that really stay with you. I completely agree with what you said, because you can relate to it, but I do like to see someone step up to be greater than what they seem to be at one point, which again is what
Very
you're
much.
showing. This main character has kind of grown, the bits I've read. It's kind of grown from what they started out as, and they're already a really strong character. It makes you more interesting. And this is when I was talking about some of the subtleties and some of the poetry you put in your stories. I love that. And even though he is grounded, you're going in space with vampires. So,
If you're going to write comics, what's going to keep you away from writing comics about vampires in space?
100%. I want to go back to the robot thing, because when you brought this up, it's going in my head. How are you working this? The robots can have their own individual thoughts?
Yes, very much so. And where I started with that was Costa, my barista robot, who does make a sort of a brief appearance in the first episode, and possibly even a briefer one in the second. But I started this with thinking, well, he's been programmed by humans, he's been built by humans, so he's got, he understands his job, and he understands how he's supposed to act, and he understands that he's autonomous to a certain degree in the fields of making coffee and what have you. So he's not going to know what a vampire is. So if he's befriended by a vampire, what's he going? He's going to think that's a person. He might think that's a person with a slightly odd diet, but he has no concept of immortal creatures or fable creatures. So I like the idea of a robot treating Leeloo like a human but she can talk to him because obviously she's the only vampire, on this moon. So she doesn't have people that she can talk to. And if she's going to try and make a friend, she's going to try and make a friend with, with almost an inanimate object, right?
Yeah.
As someone to there's no threat there. And the relationship between them, I found interesting. She just talked to him, like you might talk to the wall if you were stuck in your apartment all day. But he's responding to her as a human, as I say. And some of the quirks that she's got, he just accepts them. The fact that she goes out late at night, or will occasionally come back with a bloody t-shirt on, or what have you. He just takes it as completely normal. But in this episode and in the last episode, he starts to question her and almost act as a conscience between her and Began. So his role is developing as well. So that's where that started. And then I thought, well, if he has the power to grow in himself and learn a little bit more about others, what if there was a community? What if there was some sort of community of robots that the humans in the story and even the vampires in the story didn't have access to?
Yeah.
And we hint at that actually in the scene that you guys are in. We hint at that. He comes up with a plan to distract the robots and marches Lilu past them. He distracts the humans with coffee, but the robots let him through. And at the time, we don't really explain why they let him through. Again, I wanted to leave that question with people. Is like, well, why are the robots not just falling on her and doing their job? But he's obviously had a conversation with them and said, guys, just let us through. There's something going on here. I never, when I have these ideas, I never try or I never let myself do full exposition of them on the page as I'm doing them. I like, because it's such a beautiful medium for that. If you were writing that in a prose story, you'd have to give the reasons there and then. But I find when you're working in pictures, you can put a slightly confused look on a robot's face, and have something happen to them that you don't have to explain fully at the time. And for some readers, like myself, I see these hints in books that I read, and they go straight over my head. And when they're explained maybe a little later, you go, "Oh, of course, I should have realised what was going on." Some people will ask questions straight away and look for more meaning, as they go.
Right.
I just thought it would be just an interesting, again, just another idea to play with.
Right. That's something that fascinates me. I worked in a printing facility, and in the early 2000s, they built this massive plant. At the time, I don't know if it's ever changed, but at the time, there's nothing like it. But it used robots. And I used to make jokes because it says, "Watch out for the robots, don't let them take over." And one of the engineers told me, well, the robots only do what's been programmed into them, which is true. But I've read a lot of, science fiction, comic books and stuff, and they do robots differently. Sometimes they, Alan Moore in Captain Britain, he had that, the Fury, that Jasper's creature, which was the most terrifying thing I have ever read in my life. But when he would narrate it, he would basically say something whirs, something clicks into place. It's basically a programmed thing that he had in there. But I've read about robots that do that, where they just basically process the information that's been programmed into them. But I've also read things where you can grow, what you're talking about, and it fascinates me, like how do they root that? Of course, we've all read stuff where robots are super intelligent and they run the world and take over everything. But yours sounds, how do you have an idea of how they process all this new information and contain it?
I think we see that going on around us now, right? You could look at it as something as, I'll say basic, it's way over my head, even though I do work in IT. But the way AI is working and these neural networks, I'm not gonna suggest to anyone that they're self-aware. They're a long way from self-aware. But the more they impersonate self-aware, because that's what they're taught to do, right? Is that they're impersonating. At what point does mimicry become a character?
Yes.
And I think you can see AIs grow today, not to the point of sentience, but at some point the distinction between sentience and how you are programmed to act becomes quite narrow. So do I go as far as giving the robots complete sentience and complete autonomy? I don't think I do.
Right.
I think it's probably more of a linear projection from what I see today in terms of AI. I tend to think of AI. So I do not particularly like AI in the creative arts.
Yes.
That concerns me, as I'm sure it probably concerns many people who are into comics and what have you. AI for certain roles and for certain hugely repetitive number crunching type tasks and the different way of looking at things. I'm sure there's absolutely benefits for people, for our kind there. But it's more about, so coming back to my point, do I think robots will take over the world? No, I don't, because they're not smart. And the thing you were saying about the robots in your press works, following orders, repeating commands, but look at all the opportunities to make mistakes while they're doing that. Particularly now, as you see, they've given them legs and they've taken the wires off them and they're letting them walk around the streets and deliver pizzas and what have you. It's going to be carnage.
Yeah.
It's going to be absolutely chaos. But there's no intent there. They're not going to wake up one day and say, okay, I'm autonomous and I don't like humans anymore. It's going to be, and I treat the robots the same way as I treat people, right? I never ascribe, I've always said this in my day job work, I never ascribe to maliciousness what can be explained away by stupidity.
100%.
Yeah,
that's almost like new drivers. Somebody just gets their new driver's license. Even though if they're a good driver, you're going to make mistakes. And that, I say new drivers, but that can happen at any point in your life. But usually when you're new, it's a learning experience.
Yeah.
And that's most everything. When you switch to new technology, your job, even if it's not artificial intelligence, a lot of mistakes are made. A lot of gnashing of teeth. So,
Yeah, so I think it's for my robot, my explorations in robots. I'm not reinventing any new, or I'm not inventing any new, way of foreseeing robot sentience or anything like that. But it's more of a projection of how far do you have to mimic something for something to be real.
Right. That's really interesting. That's an interesting way of thinking and putting things together. I gotta ask, how are you doing this with vampires? Because it's a logic the way you think. How are you doing? How are you applying this to vampires? Because everything. I noticed everything you're doing, everything I've read. There's a logic and a system to how you, like it would be in real life. How are you applying this to vampires?
I think it's a really good question, because there's so much conflicting lore, L-O-R-E, about around vampires. There's you have a lot of wiggle room to make vampires in your universe do what you want them to do and behave the way you want them to behave. So I've put Lilu on Enceladus, which is obviously a long, long way from the sun. So that means I don't even have to address the can they walk in daylight or not? Because there isn't any. Saturn doesn't create light. Saturn only reflects light. So the only light there is artificial light, and the light that's being reflected from the sun, over 2 billion miles away. So don't have to address that. So we have no idea if Lulu can walk in sunlight or not. I do address her feeding. I am making some assumptions in episode 4 around religious symbols. You will find that they will come after her with crosses in this episode, when they realise what she is, and we realise why people are doing what they're doing, without giving too much away. Sorry. So you kind of get to write your own for your own universe. There's no one template that you think I've got to do that. I've seen vampires in some movies being able to shapeshift. As far as I've explored at the moment, Lily can't shapeshift. She lives pretty much as a regular person who can I call it vamp out. I don't know what the proper word is. When she gets pissed, she goes for it. The teeth come out, the eyes go red, the muscles start to ripple a little bit, and people better watch out. She has bad temper.
Well, I haven't seen the bad temper yet, but I'll take your word for it. I just saw the coolness.
You will.
That's really something else. Okay, now while we're on that, you were talking about future plans. You mentioned another story after this is over. Also, a completely different series.
It would be completely different. I say I've got an idea that I could extend Pioneers if we wanted to do another one, but I think the story that's gnawing away at me at the moment, and I'll tell you about it because it's a germ of an idea, right? It's certainly I've barely even written anything down apart from a handful of notes, but it's something that may resonate a little bit. It's partly to do with my personal situation, Don, as you know, having recently lost my wife, which I'm perfectly open and comfortable talking about. I've bring Stephanie into almost every conversation I have because it's I feel close to her like that. But it's not about grief or anything like that. I do write a little bit about that in my Substack, as I know you've seen, and that's healthy for me. But this is more about we are engineered by life. Life is engineered to improve you to be the very, very best version of an amoeba, a squirrel, a snail, a whatever the life form is, a plant, a mushroom, to the point that we have children.
Yeah.
And after that, life doesn't really care what happens to us because it has no control over what happens to us at that point, right? Human beings could have evolved, in an extreme example, to live perfect, healthy lives until they're 35 or 45 or whatever the age will be. And as soon as we've had children, our heads explode, right? And nature never would have known that. They never would have known they've made that terrible miscalculation over millions of years of evolution, that as soon as we've had children, we go horribly wrong. And we start to break down because it has no control. Once you've passed your DNA onwards, it can't look at what you become later. That's the blueprint it's got. So the story I had in mind is, what if either through genetic experiments or a freak of nature, 10,000 years in the future, all of a sudden, at the end of our lives, we got a second opportunity to progenate, is that the word? Have another, maybe we, out of our elbow, we bud another human off of our elbow. How would and the story would be, how would our lives change? How would our evolution change if the point at which today we start to break down, life understands that it gets another chance at the end, how would we change and how would we evolve mentally as well as physically? Now, that may mean absolutely nothing to anybody, but I think for possibly people of a certain age, if I was able to weave a story around that concept, as we find ourselves, getting older and slowing down and what have you.
Right.
But if life was actually able to go, well, no, I need to keep this person healthy. I need to keep this creature, whatever sort of, thing, animal, plant, whatever we are, until we get this second go. I wonder how our lives would change. And that would be the backdrop for a really crazy story. But again, it may come to nothing, Don. But it's just this idea of playing with ideas that I enjoy. And if there's a story and some art there to make, I'm game for it.
Okay, my friend, you've let the cat out of the bag because you said you may not come to anything. I'm praying to God that it does because that sounds incredible. A couple of things.
Yeah.
When you come up with the stuff, you mentioned you haven't written anything down. Do you think of the story first and the artwork second?
That's a really good question. Do you know how I actually think, Don? I enjoy movies very much. I don't know how you make movies. I know nothing about movies, but I do enjoy them. And I think in scenes.
Oh.
I think in my head of a scene, and then I think, okay, where would this scene happen? Who would be the characters in this scene? What would work well? And I'm pretty sure most of my ideas stem from a sort of a cross wire in my brain that says what would look good, and then how do I incorporate that into a story? It's almost like my life is a series of Rocky montages.
Yeah.
But that's where I find I work best, and particularly I know it may sound crazy. I don't have to have many of those things. I think pioneers started with rather than just the concept of a vampire on Enceladus, it possibly started with a scene from the first book.
Yeah.
Either Lilu traveling to Enceladus and asking herself the sort of tough questions of why am I doing this, what am I trying to get out of this, and just the story opens obviously with a ship out in the dark, and then her looking at herself in one of the portholes in the window, and then looking round the cabin. And I'm pretty sure I thought of that scene, and I thought that would just look so cool. And I know you've spotted in it, knives and forks and things just floating around the cabin and stuff like that. And it kind of crystallizes in my head, and then I work out where it would fit in the story, or if it would fit in the story. Sometimes the ideas are crazy and don't work, but that's kind of, I think, how I tend to think. So it's a kind of visual, but it's kind of storytelling too. Right.
Well, you're thinking, I didn't know you worked this way. You're thinking the story first. You're putting the story down, you're visualizing the story, and then you're adding the visuals later, which I find incredible. A lot of people like to draw. I like to draw and make things up. They're doodles. But everything I do, I have an idea. I'll sit there and draw it and think of it, but I don't really have any story. I just have a bunch of little, characters and things they would do. But like I said, your writing, a lot of cartoonists I'm talking American cartoonists in comics, I like writer-artists. They were always my favorites, but not always. I found some artists, they work really good with a writer, and I always bring up poetry, but they have a lot of depth in the story and a lot of passion, pathos. And when at one point an artist will start writing their own stories, some of them are fantastic, but a lot of them, it's very wooden. It's just kind of sophomoric and wooden. And your stories have everything in it, but you work like a writer first and a really fantastic artist second. They work
That's
well
really
together.
kind, Don.
Well, no, it's true. I don't just pass things out like that. I really enjoy your artwork. I would read your stuff just for the artwork, but the story is just as rich as if you were just worked as a writer itself. But your thought process surprised me. I didn't realize that. Has there ever been a time when you come up with something out of a sketchbook first?
Probably not much. No, probably not. Probably not much. I don't often. I'll often sit down with a character and draw a character, but they're mostly, I don't think I haven't yet started a story with no story, and let a story spring from a piece of art. I'm not sure I'm that creative in that way. I remember now. It's funny actually. One of my granddaughters was seeing a therapist from one of our cancer charities because obviously she lost her grandma
Right.
and was having a bit of a tough time with that, and she did some art therapy.
Yeah.
And just this weekend we went and her piece of art was exhibited in a little art fair in our local town, or the one town over, and we went to see it, and she'd made some beautiful things, really, really beautiful things, and the people there were so kind, really nice, and they sat down and they remembered Reva's work, and we talked about it. Anyway, they said, "Would you like to sit down and draw something?" So we sat round a table, and Reva gave me because obviously she knows, she knows what I do and she knows what I draw, and she gave me a pencil and a piece of paper and said, "Draw something," and I couldn't. I just couldn't draw something. I ended up just teaching her how to make different patterns on the piece of paper that just looked good the way you turn the piece of paper out. But I couldn't. Partly I couldn't because it was Reva's day and I wanted, I didn't want anyone to go, "Oh, look, he can draw." But more than that, it was that I just had nothing in my head that I could put down on paper. So yeah, I don't think I just necessarily start from visual ideas, which is funny because I do, and I've always regarded myself as an artist who writes, not as a writer who can draw. If you sit me in front of a desk with stuff on it and say, doodle something, I will draw something on that desk. It won't be just something that comes into my head. I wouldn't have thought.
Right.
That's funny. Not thought about it before.
Yeah, but Howard Chaykin is an American cartoonist. He wrote that comic books are graphic design in the service of narrative. And that's what you're doing. You draw from the narrative that's in your head.
I think so.
Now, like I said, I was a graphic artist for 40 years. And I was in a big meeting about diversity. And at one point, they gave everybody a little square piece of wood, a little flat board. And you're supposed to draw something on it for diversity. And I don't know, I had markers and stuff. I kind of knocked something out, but one of the guys that worked for me said, "Well, I would have thought more of you, Don." I did the same thing. I saw a board. It wasn't like drawing in my sketchbook for fun for me, where I draw a guy with a bird's head and a robot body and a flaming sword, with bat wings. I mean, something I'd want to draw. It was just, okay, I just drew a few graphic symbols and something. But that's it. You're working from the narrative that you're coming up with. The artwork is a service to your story.
I think so.
A lot of people put the apples before the cart. When if you're an artist, you're just drawing, and the next thing you know, I got to do a story. Okay, you're the opposite. You're doing the story first, and then making the artwork as a service, which is what you're supposed to do, and very few of us do. So I take my hat off to that. That's amazing.
No, I'll absolutely take that compliment, because, as I say, the writing is the bit I find hardest. I'll play around with stories for quite a long time before I think they're good enough to actually put down. But yeah, that's really cool. I definitely take that one.
All right. Now let's go back to this germ of an idea. How did you come up with this about the basically the reproduction and why they protect you in the very beginning?
I think it's been in my head. I think it's been in my head for quite a while. I do love science. I'm not a scientist. I'm not that bright. But the first series, I'm sure we've talked about before, which was the very niche series that I started in 2020, which was just called Wren.
Yeah.
Was about Christopher Wren, Sir Christopher Wren, the English architect, but he had a big role in the starting of the Royal Society, which is the first serious science organisation and natural history, and natural sciences organisation in Britain in 1640 something. And I wrote that was a 3 or 4 book series, and I know that went off into fantasy directions, but it was just a love of science that wanted me to talk about some of the ideas that they were having, at that time, and of course against the backdrop of the Great Fire of London and the plague and all that. But there was a lot of science being done, good science and bad science at the time, and it's just I think it's the ideas. When I watch a David Attenborough nature program, and I've been aware of this idea of that we pass everything we have down in our genes, and after we have passed it, nature kind of writes us off. There is no mechanism for improvement after that point. It doesn't care about us after that point. And I thought, is that a human thing? And then I thought, well, no, it's not. It's every kind of life goes through exactly the same cycle, and then we're all forgotten about. And I think those ideas probably crystallise, as I say, as you age, and you look at your children and you look at your grandchildren, you think that cycle's repeating itself. And wouldn't it be interesting just to mess with that a bit, just to see what it would do to us as a species? I think, again, how I work that into telling an actual story against that backdrop. But I think I used to have a boss who would say, there's a there.
Yeah.
And I just feel that there's a there. That might be fun.
That is, you got my head turning. I'm going to be thinking about this probably for the rest of my life. That's unique. Now let's go back.
Yeah, I do like the idea of stories that haven't been told.
Right.
Because and they're all they say 7 stories and all that. So you put something in front of that backdrop that makes it an interesting story. But as I said, at the top, it's just these crazy ideas that I find so enticing, that make me want to write stories around them as a backdrop.
Nice. That's something. Let's go back to Pioneers. Now, do you have a campaign to finance this, or are you just putting these out as they come out? We didn't discuss this before.
I have a campaign that I started. I started on the 4th of July. That's just a couple of days ago.
Okay.
It's doing really well. I had a fantastic first couple of days. Really amazing. Lots of people have come out to support me. I think we funded in 7 hours.
Oh wow!
Which was awesome. Incredible, really incredible. I'm so grateful to everyone who's come out. I was so nervous about this, Don, because it's been 2 years since the last campaign.
Yes.
Because obviously, my priorities, frankly, have been in other places.
Of course.
And there was a period that I, couldn't write about anything. But it was important to me to finish this story, not just for myself, but I know there were some people who have learned to care about these characters too, and I think I owe them, the answers to it. But also, it is something that I do, and it does bring me great joy and great comfort to be able to be able to work in this medium and put things out that people enjoy reading. So yeah, I think we're about 300% of target, pretty much, at the moment. And it's doing really well. And the hardest thing in the world, Don, as I'm sure you know, is finding new people. So the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be spending trying to find new people. I do find people are very, very kind, and if they find it, they tend to like it. But as you know, in this what do they call it, artisanal comics industry, it's finding the new people that's really the hardest, the most legwork. So I'm going to try and do some more around that kind of thing.
Well, that's something that fascinates me was the campaigns. It seems to me like that's where a lot of the comics are coming from. It's a whole community. I always joke with Rook because the store Rook went to in his area, he lives about an hour and a half away from me, and the store he went to is no more. And so I told him about a store that's halfway between where he lives and I live that I go to sometimes. We went. He was going to set up a subscription. Can't even talk right now. Anyway, he took the list home to work out his books and decided not to because he's exclusively doing campaigns. And
Really?
yeah, his, and that's something he's been spoken to by his better half was, why are you buying so much? Which has never happened before, but it's just, and the work is really unique. I mean, no two are ever the same. And I'm saying that we've had guests that have done comics about Bigfoot, the North American idea. Mm-hmm. None of them are the same thing. We've had westerns, none, cowboys, and each one are completely different. Zombie stories, but it's not like in American comics somebody came up with a Batman character. Next thing you know, there's a whole slew of each one is completely different, and there's all kinds of work that every time we have a guest come on, it's something that I've never thought about, or if it is something I'm aware of, it's a completely different angle that, I like that. But it seems to me like it's a more exciting area, and people are finding more and more of this. Now, this show doesn't post till the 27th this month. Is your campaign still going on, or are we too late?
It was, no.
Oh, okay.
It will still be going on. I think I go on to, 4th of August, I think.
Oh, okay, so we got some time. All right, so if you're listening to the show, also, are they going to be able to buy the other books?
Yes, absolutely. All the back issues are available in the campaign. It's one through 4, with say one more to come by the end of the year. So yeah, it's a really good time to get on board. And I think as well as seeing the story develop, you kind of get to see me develop as well as a writer and an artist as well. I say I try and keep it as high quality as I can, but I think I'm getting better.
Right.
So it's almost like we get to a crescendo in the story and in the storyteller as well. I hope that's the way it's working as well. I work with a fantastic, incredibly talented colorist. A guy called Falk Hansel, and he makes my line work look absolutely incredible. He is way more than 50% of what this book is about. He's actually a games designer. Is what he does, and he has been working on a game called Somnus for years. And he is a perfectionist, and he wants to get, and the artwork in his paintings, he doesn't color comics very often. We actually met when I was working on Ren still, and I saw his work and asked him if he would do a cover, and he made a beautiful cover, just no artwork from me at all. He just painted it, and we got talking, and I really enjoyed his work. And then he offered to colour Pioneers. And I thought, well, there's no way I could be able to afford this. He's a proper artist. He's a genius. But he liked the story too, and said he would like to be a part of it. And he kind of did me a bit of a deal on his page rate. I know he did. He does me favours, and his work is absolutely magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. The colours and the special effects and things that he puts into the book are worth the cover price in itself. His work's beautiful.
I'm going to agree with that. I'm going to go even further. That a lot of times when people are doing digital color, it's either too much or it overpowers the artwork. This one, he renders the artwork, but he doesn't destroy your line quality. And the colors are, well, they work with the story. I feel like I'm in that world. He has surfaces in it, he has depth in it, but they're not all natural colors. There's some brightness that, makes it, stand out and stuff, which I like. But a lot of times when they're digitally coloring old comics, the line work is gone. Sometimes they just over-render everything, which I'm not a fan of. Or it depends on the work. Sometimes I really like bright colors. It depends on what the story is. But this one, it's absolutely the way it should be. It just adds to it. And I honestly can't imagine this comic being colored by anybody else. And I've never given props to the colorist, and I do apologize for it because I have noticed it. It's absolutely beautiful work.
Yeah, it is. Here, well said. Yeah, no, and he's a really nice guy to work with as well. Really nice guy. He's very kind about my work. He's very kind about the stories, and again, for someone who is a beautiful artist in his own right, he will say things like, when I talk to him about choices and what have you, he will always say, "No, Pete, I am just here to help you tell the story." He's very kind.
And humble.
Doesn't push his ideas, and humble. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. And just an absolute gentleman. It's a real joy to work with.
Well, you're bringing up something I haven't really thought about either. How do you do this? Do you give an idea of like what you like something, or is he coming up with the colors himself? How do you guys work this out together?
Most of the stuff, so in the script, my scripts are a mess. This is the one good thing about being a writer-artist, is that most of the stuff you would have to write down for the artist, you don't have to bother because you know what's in your head.
Right.
So I don't write much panel description for myself because my brain already knows how I'm gonna draw that panel. So what I do after I've written it and drawn it, I then go back and I add colour notes for Falk. And in our code, in our language, I highlight those in yellow, so he knows it's a colour note and just not just a random comment that I'm making about a panel that I've drawn. And he's very respectful of those colour notes. And occasionally he'll come back and and we'll have a conversation about maybe what. I remember a conversation we had about what Lilu's eyes do when she's going into vampire mode, and I was like, well, I don't know, what do you think? And he went, well, they could go red, and I said, yeah, that sounds great. Let's make them red. So I don't think in colour. I think quite flat. And I suck at colour. I occasionally do bits of colour, and I'm learning to do bits of colour, but I don't think in colour.
Right.
If you see what I mean. If someone says, well, what tone should the walls be, or what colour should that outfit be, I kind of go, I don't know. What do you think? So we work on that. So there's definitely things that I do say. If I'm in a hospital room and there's screens around. I'll say I want green writing glowing on the screen, or what have you, or I want blue lighting. So some things will come to me, and I'll say, no, that feels important to me. So let's go with that. And then other times I'll write nothing, and he'll ping me on on email or something and say, you haven't given me any instructions about these outfits, and I'll just go, well, what do you think? What do you think will look? What do you think will look cool?
Right.
So we work it out, but there are some things I do feel there's a little snippet for episode for the colour pink. If you go back through 1 to 3, you'll realise the colour pink comes up a lot in the environment, and that's actually going to be part of the story and part of the reveal of one of the things that's going on in episode 4. So that's nobody else knows that yet. I've not told anybody that.
Oh wow! Well, now 4 more people will know. It's one thing. We're going back to colors. A lot of people will, like I said, I draw in a sketchbook, and you'll say if you make up a character, you'll color the character. Okay, I got this down. Or you color little parts. But when you're trying to color a whole page and a whole story, you're having to think of a lot of things. You're having to think of color theory, you have to think of balance. And what you came up with in your sketchbook with colored pencils may not work for everything. And a lot of times when people aren't used to this, experienced, it's what I call clown vomit. It's just a bunch of mess, colors everywhere. So when you're talking about that was a good description. You might have an idea of some of it, but what color are the walls, what are this, and it all has to work together. And it also has to show the reader where their eye is going to move and what you want to bring out. There's a lot of things colorists do that don't think about. I've always heard they're the unsung heroes. And when I say this, when I put the blog together, I try to give credit to the writer and the artist, the inker. I don't mean this to be a slight. I don't always credit the letterer or the colorist. And that's not a slight. I mean, it is a slight because I don't put it in there. But it is something, it's like a movie soundtrack. If you go to the movie and people say, oh, it was a nice soundtrack, well, maybe it didn't do its job. Unless you're John Williams and you're awesome. But, well, where can people find you online if they're looking for your work and everything?
I do have a Substack. I have a Substack, and I write in that. Again, I'm very English, Donna, and I'm not good with publicising myself. It's one of the problems still.
I understand.
Being British, but I do enjoy writing on my Substack. I write about the process of what I go through with the work and teasers and and I throw ideas around with people, and I do talk about my life and and loss and grief and all that kind of thing, because it's all I find it really helps me. I'm able to say things to a piece of paper that are kind of hard to say when you're talking to someone else.
Right.
I don't know why, but I just enjoy it. But yeah, Substack. I think my Substack page is called, Peter Sky 9. All one word, Peter Sky 9 at substack.com.
Is the 9 spelled out or just the letter?
No,
the
just
number 9?
the number 9.
All right.
Yeah, just the 9. Peter Sky number 9 at substack.com. And I write in there. I had a hiatus, obviously, while Stephanie was poorly, and for a little while after she passed. But I started writing again. I like to write about, once a month. But obviously, this is the awkward part, a little more when there's a campaign running.
Well,
because I do, try and share with people the thank yous and the please come and look at the book, and the please share with everyone kind of thing, in that eternal search for new readers, right? Because I love the thought that people enjoy it, and I love the thought that people reach out and try and try and find copies and what have you. The last book, episode 3, sold in 14 countries, Don.
Oh, wow.
And I just think that's amazing. That something I wrote and drew is sitting either in a box or on a shelf or on a table or what have you in 14 different countries. I mean, that's incredible.
It is. Are they all in English? Did you translate them?
I've never translated. Again, with the what we'll call artisanal comics, right? The runs are not big.
Right.
I don't do anything through the direct market. I don't have any distributors. Kickstarter for me and the sort of the print runs that I do. I don't do cons because I'm not that comfortable in crowds, and really there aren't many that are super accessible to independent writers. So
Right.
Kickstarter is really my channel. So I do. So the runs aren't big, and I think the cost of translation and printing in different languages would probably break me financially.
Right, I
So
understand.
I've not done that yet. But again, the Kickstarter audience, if it was something that they really wanted, I'd certainly look to do it. The audience is everything to me. Whatever if the audience comes up with a good idea, I'm all in for it.
Wow. And then when you said 14 countries, I guess it just amazes me that they're buying it in probably not their native tongue, but they can still read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm always embarrassed
I
when I go to
know,
another
I-
country and I can't speak their language, but they can speak mine. I mean, I appreciate it,
yeah.
but I'm always embarrassed.
I feel the same. I got some photos sent back from a guy who bought sort of the whole back catalogue and T-shirts. He got T-shirts with Lilu on and everything. A guy in Finland. And he's sending me these photos of him wearing one of my T-shirts, and I'm thinking this is a country that I'm not even sure I could find on a map.
Right.
And there's a guy there who's found my work, and he's really enjoying it. I mean, that's just incredible. Incredible.
That is sweet to hear. That's got to be something. You didn't give out the address to your Kickstarter.
Oh, okay. How do I do that? How do I do that?
Well, I guess you could just go on Kickstarter and type in Peter Taylor Blood and Stars or Pioneers Blood and
You'll
Stars.
definitely find me if you type in Peter Taylor. Hang on, let's just have a look. It is called, it's called Pioneers Blood and Stars 1 to 4. And it's even got a subtitle in there. I'll tell you what I'll do, Don. I'll put it in the chat for you. Yeah, would that be an idea?
Yeah.
Put it in the chat for you.
Also,
I
if you're
know
listening
you
to
do.
this, all this information will be on the blog, so it doesn't matter where you're listening to. Just go to the blogs at bunchofdorks.com, click on the Cyclops, and we'll have images and everything Peter talks about in his site, his Substack, and his Kickstarter will be linked on there too, if you can just take the time to go to the blog.
Thank you.
Anytime. Well, God, I could talk to you a lot longer, but my friend, we've out of time.
We are, and it's 1 a.m. here.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
I'm
Yes.
going to bed.
All right.
But it's such a pleasure to talk to you, Don. I say, please pass on my best to Rook. You guys have just been so kind, and it is so lovely just to have somewhere that I can go and talk comics for a while.
Oh, always, always.
It's a real pleasure.
And as I
Thanks,
said,
man.
you're always welcome. Always welcome to the show. Just let us know when, and you're here. And if you ever just want to come on and talk about comics randomly, you can do that too. You don't have to have a Kickstarter. All right, everybody.
Gotcha. Thank
Thanks
you.
for listening. You can find us on bunchofdorks.com. Click on the blue Cyclops, and you can find everything we talked about. And in the meantime,
Read
more.
comics.
You can hear our most recent 20 episodes on iTunes. If you would like to hear our older episodes, you can find them on our blog. Just go to bunchofdorks.com and click on the Cyclops.
Joe Dimension can be found on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe, rate, leave a review, tell a friend, or like us on Facebook. Thanks for listening.
If you would like to be part of the show, draw a fake comic book cover and we'll use it to promote our new episodes online.
If you'd like to promote your music, send us your MP3 and you can have a musical spotlight on the show. Plus, we'll add you on a link on our music page.
We have t-shirts designed available for you. So you can find them on the sidebar of the blog. Listen to the show, wear the shirt.